So here's a question that pretty much every parent and educator has asked at some point. Why do young children cheat? Today, we're going to explore the really surprising link between a child's honesty and their persistence.
And to get some answers, we're diving into a fascinating study from researchers at Hangzhou Normal University and the University of Toronto, who decided to take a scientific look at this very question. You've probably seen it, right? A child is facing a tough puzzle or a game, and they take a little shortcut. It happens all the time, even with preschoolers. But what's actually going on inside their heads when they decide to peek at the answer?
Now, this kind of behavior usually kicks off a big debate. Is it a sign of a character flaw, something that's just a fixed part of who they are? Or is it something else? Maybe just a reaction to feeling totally frustrated and overwhelmed by a challenge?
Well, this study suggests a completely different answer. It shifts our focus away from the idea of a child's fixed character and toward their ability to just persevere in a difficult moment.
So, how did the researchers get to the bottom of this? Well, they designed this really clever experiment built around a classic spot the difference game. The study included about 200 children, all between 3 and 6 years old. And it's helpful to know the specific group they worked with. They were all Han Chinese from middle-class families living in a large city in China.
Okay, so the experiment started out simply. First, the kids were introduced to the game with a really easy practice round. Just to make sure everyone understood the rules and how it all worked.
After that little warm-up, though, the difficulty got cranked way up. The next puzzle they got was intentionally designed to be really challenging for their age group, and this is what set the stage for the real test.
Now, here comes the crucial part. The children were given another one of these hard puzzles, but this time they were left all alone in the room. The experimenter told them the answer was right there on the next page, but they were explicitly told not to peek. And of course, what they didn't know was that a hidden camera was recording everything.
And the results from this little setup? They were truly eye-opening. They pointed away from the idea of fixed character traits and towards something much more immediate: persistence.
The key concept the researchers landed on is something they call situational persistence. Think of it like this. It's not about whether you're a generally persistent person. It's about having the grit to get through one specific, tough challenge, right here and right now.
And this leads to the first huge discovery. The researchers found that a child's general personality, what you might call their trait persistence, it didn't actually predict if they would cheat. So a kid who is normally pretty persistent wasn't necessarily any less likely to peak in this one situation. And that's a real game changer, because it means honesty isn't just some fixed trait you're born with.
This graph really tells the story. You can see that the kids who didn't cheat spent way more time actually working on the puzzle. Their situational persistence was just higher. On the other hand, the ones who did cheat, they gave up much faster. The takeaway is clear. It was that in-the-moment effort, not some fixed personality trait, that made all the difference.
So that raises another really important question, doesn't it? If a child decides to cheat, does that decision actually affect how they'll handle the next challenge they face? Well, the study looked into that too.
And the answer was a big yes. The second key finding was that the act of cheating actually made children less persistent on a later task. It seems like it has this direct, negative effect on their future effort.
Just look at this. The effect is so clear. The kids who were honest, they kept up a pretty consistent level of effort. But the kids who cheated showed this huge drop in how long they were willing to stick with the next puzzle. It's almost as if taking that shortcut made them less willing to try hard again.
Okay, so we've got all this data. What does it all mean for us in the real world? Let's break down the practical takeaways for parents and for teachers.
What this study does is it completely reframes how we should think about honesty in young kids. It's not just about teaching them a moral lesson. It's really about helping them build a skill, the skill of tolerating frustration and sticking with a challenge.
So how do we actually do that? The research points to a few really powerful strategies. First, we can actively help kids to stay with a challenge, even just for a little bit longer. Second, we should praise their effort and the process, not just whether they get the right answer. And finally, let's normalize struggle. Let them know it's totally okay for things to be hard. That alone can make a task feel way less overwhelming.
If there's just one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. When young kids cheat, it's often not a character flaw. It's a signal. It's a sign that the challenge in front of them is just too much for them to handle in that moment.
And that leaves us with one last really crucial question to think about. Knowing how intertwined persistence and honesty are,
how can we, as the adults in their lives, build environments that support children when they inevitably get frustrated?
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the science of childhood honesty.
We really hope this gives you a new perspective on how to nurture not just persistence but integrity in the young people in your life.